3 of the fantasy football season. Here's a few players I look to buy and trade for this week. The first guy, A.J. Brown of the Philadelphia Eagles. A.J. Brown and this Eagle offense hasn't been explosive really besides Saquon Barkley the first 2 weeks of the season, but they're still 2-0 on the season with wins versus Dallas and a win in Kansas City in week 2. So the first 2 games for Brown, week 1 versus Dallas, a catch, 8 yards, 1 target. And then week 2 with the Chiefs, 5 catches, 27 yards, but he did have 8 targets. A.J. Brown, we know he's a big-time wide receiver. We know he's going to make big-time plays, and he's just off to a slow start the way these games have gone. And obviously with the tush-push in the red zone, touchdowns could be a tough thing for Brown to come up with this season. But like I said, Philadelphia, they're loaded offensively. Some weeks it's going to be Brown, some weeks Devonta, but most weeks it's going to be Hurts and Saquon Barkley running a lot. So right now, well, Brown hasn't done much, and we know he's got great upside. As long as this offense can pass a little bit more, he's definitely a buy low player this week. Next player, Derrick Henry of the Baltimore Ravens. So Derrick Henry, he had a monster week 1, and then week 2, non-existent surprisingly in that matchup versus the Cleveland Browns, where they put up 41 points and Henry was bottled up. So week 1 at Buffalo, the monster game, like I said, 18 carries, 169 rush yards, 2 touchdowns, a catch, 13 yards. And then week 2 versus Cleveland, he got shut down to about 2.1 yards per carry, 11 carries, 23 yards in that one. But week 3, I think he bounces back as Derrick Henry. So after a bad game, and fantasy owners could be frustrated, even though it's only obviously week 3 here, Derrick Henry, definitely someone I would put feelers out and see if I could buy him well this week. Next player, Breece Hall of the New York Jets. So just like Henry, a big week 1 it was for Breece Hall versus a very good defense of the Pittsburgh Steelers, where he went off in that one. 19 carries, 107 yards, 2 catches, 38 yards. And then week 2 versus Buffalo, it was a total stinker for this Jet team the whole way, with the injury to Fields, especially 10 carries, 29 yards, 2 catches, 9 yards. So Brandon Allen hasn't been a factor except week 1, a goal line touchdown. But in terms of touches and making plays, Brandon Allen's been non-existent. So week 3, a decent matchup of paper at the Tampa Bay Buccaneers for Breece Hall, where we'll see if Fields plays or not. But I think Breece Hall coming into the year was underrated in drafts, and now I don't think Allen's much of a threat to him. So definitely someone after coming off a bad game for owners to go out there and get. Next player, Ashton Jeanty of the Vegas Raiders. Ashton Jeanty, week 1, a touchdown salvage his day. We only had 2 yards per carry in that one, 19 carries, 38 yards a touch, 2 catches, 2 yards. And then week 2 versus the Chargers, they got down early, and Jeanty, not much he could do in the passing game yet, where that's still trying to develop. 11 carries, 43 yards, 3 catches, and 1 yard. So week 3, Washington, not a great matchup. Jeanty, I know he was a first-round pick, early second in most fantasy drafts, but this guy, he has all the tools to become one of the better backs in fantasy football. So far, well, he's off to a slow start, but we know the talent's there for Ashton Jeanty. Definitely a running back for owners to go out there and buy this week. The next player, Courtland Sutton of the Denver Broncos. Courtland Sutton, he's the number 1 option in the passing game for this Denver Bronco team. But week 2, he didn't do much. Where they had a good game plan was Indianapolis to hold them to 1 catch for 6 yards on 4 targets, where it was the Troy Franklin show. But week 1, had a nice game versus Tennessee, 6 catches, 61 yards, a touchdown. Week 2, like I mentioned, wasn't a good game. But week 3 at the Chargers, their defense is a good unit, obviously, over there in Los Angeles. I know they shut down and held the Raiders out of the end zone. That's not saying much. But this Bronco offense, they really get things going where it's going through Courtland Sutton. So this week, I think Sutton gets back into the mix, and fantasy owners should think that as well, even though it's not a great matchup with the Chargers. But Sutton, their number 1 option, got paid big money in the offseason, and definitely someone coming off a stinker to buy this week. Next player, DJ Moore of the Chicago Bears. So it looks like Rome Odunze and Caleb Williams have the great rapport over there in Chicago. But DJ Moore, still a solid wide receiver, still has good years ahead of him in terms of putting up numbers. Week 1 versus Minnesota, 3 carries, 8 yards, 3 catches, 68 yards, a fumble loss on 5 targets. And then week 2 with Detroit, 5 catches, 46 yards on 6 targets. So the target's still decent for DJ Moore. Just Caleb and the Doomsday seems like have better rapport. But this week, a great matchup versus the Dallas Cowboys, where I could see this offense pop off and a lot of guys get numbers. So right now, if you're trying to get DJ Moore on your team, I'm not going to wait towards the end of the week or early next week. But a good matchup versus the Dallas Cowboys, where obviously if he has a good game and you wait on him, you got to pay more. But if you get him and put him in your starting lineup versus Cowboy defense, it could help fantasy owners in a big way. And DJ Moore, believe it or not, even in a down year last season, had 98 catches. So him and Caleb got to get on the same page, and he's got to get this Ben Johnson offense down as well. And the final player I look to buy and trade for is Brian Thomas Jr. of the Jacksonville Jaguars. So there's some video going around. You don't look that engaged into things as Brian Thomas Jr. And we even saw Trevor Lawrence wave off Liam Cohen as well in the ball game on Sunday. So Brian Thomas underwhelming, where he was a late first, early second round pick. Week 1 versus the Panthers, a carry 9 yards, a touchdown, a catch 11 yards. And then week 2 at Cincinnati, 4 catches, 49 yards. But the important thing here is 12 targets in that one. So week 3 matchup versus the Houston Texans. They're bend but don't break type of defensive unit. We saw they played well in that game versus the Bucs, even though they lost at the end. But Brian Thomas, he's a great wide receiver. We saw had a big season last year in his rookie year. And I think it's just early season woes, and he's banged up as well with a wrist injury. But he played through it, obviously. So right now, Brian Thomas has had 2 bad games in the early going, but the route participation is there. And obviously the targets are there. He's definitely a player to buy low this week. So that's a few plays I look to buy and trade for week 3 of the fantasy football season.